Hello, everybody. So today we're talking about a very alarming case. The details in the case are extremely brutal and disturbing. And it's going to be a bit on the longer side. It's probably going to be one of the longest videos I've done on this channel. Today we're going to be talking about the Dardeen family murders. I've seen the names, I've seen the photos, never really knew what it was about until I started doing my research. And when I started my research, I could not believe what I was reading. It was just like horrifying. And there's really no conclusion to it, unfortunately. Well, I'm going to tell you the story and you're going to let me know if you think there's a conclusion, and you'll see why I'm saying that once we're done. But all the links I used for research will be down below, like always, and there will also be a link to my other podcast, Sinister, if you want to check that out. But let's go ahead and get into this. So, in 1986, Keith and Elaine Dardeen of Mount Carmel, Illinois, were starting to begin their family. They had a 2-year-old son named Peter, but Keith was currently unemployed and they had nowhere to live and no way to take care of their child. One day, however, Keith landed a job as a plant operator at Rena Lake Conservatory Facility in Ina, Illinois. Keith scored temporary accommodations for the family. It was a trailer on some farmland, and to help with income, Elaine found a job at an office supply store in Mount Vernon. The couple began socializing by joining a small musical ensemble at a local Baptist church. By mid 1987, the couple had started to really put down roots in the area, and they were happy. They were living comfortably, and they intended to purchase a more permanent home eventually, and everything seemed to be going really well. But by the fall of 1987, Elaine began to notice a change in Keith. He seemed to be surviving on less and less sleep. He was noticeably more irritable and stressed than usual. She asked him several times if he was okay, but he would just brush her off and be very vague with his answers. And Elaine soon found out that she was pregnant again, and she and Keith had been discussing another child for some time, and she thought that he would be excited, but he was actually horrified. She couldn't understand why this was his reaction, so she asked him what his problem was, and Keith only alluded to them needing to move ASAP. His behavior had worsened to the point of extreme paranoia, but he still refused to tell Elaine what was going on. Elaine finally threatened to move back in with her mother, so he told her the truth. And it would have allegedly something to do with a man named Tom Odell. So Tom Odell was convicted of killing his parents, his 14-year-old sister, and his 2 brothers, who were 13 and 10, in 1985. He claimed to be on LSD at the time and was taking revenge for the years of abuse he had suffered by his mother. In reality, she wasn't abusive. Tom was engaged in theft and drug use in his teens, and when he turned 18, his parents gave him a choice to either get a job and grow up or to move out. And he decided to murder them. The Odell family murders were just one of 15 separate incidents of homicide in the area. Ina and the greater part of Jefferson County was extremely violent. There were a lot of incidents. There was a lot of crime. When a 15-year-old girl was violated and murdered just miles from the Dardeen home, Keith purchased a firearm and once threatened to pull it on a stranger who showed up to their trailer one night asking to make a call. Keith convinced it was a setup, and when Elaine asked why he thought that, he gave a very cagey and unconvincing reply. He was so scared he was willing to quit his new and very well-paying job just to get away, and by November 1987 he was frantically trying to get a new place to live. But they wouldn't get the chance to move. On November 18th, Keith would fail to show up for work. Keith was a very reliable and punctual employee, so when he didn't show, his supervisor began to call to see if he was okay. The calls went unanswered, So the supervisor called Keith's parents in Mount Carmel, but they also hadn't heard from him. Don Dardeen, Keith's dad, was very concerned. So he called Jefferson County Sheriff's Office and arranged to meet with them at the trailer to do a welfare check. Don gave them the spare key he had when he arrived, and they would find a very harrowing scene inside the trailer. And right now, I want to give a trigger warning because the details I'm going to give are disturbing. They're gross. I can't believe I'm going to tell you what whoever did this did. So just right now, be prepared. In the bedroom were the lifeless bodies of Elaine and Peter, who were found, as well as the corpse of a newborn baby girl. They had been bound, gagged, tortured, then beaten to death with a baseball bat found at the scene. Elaine had been so badly beaten that she had gone into early labor, and her daughter was met with the same fate. They did the same thing to the newborn baby girl when her mother gave birth to her prematurely during the violent assault. And when I read that, it gave me chills and I felt extremely sick. Keith nor his car were to be found, and at first, police assumed he'd killed his family and fled. There was a search for him, and a group of hunters came across Keith's body, lying in a wheat field near Rena Lake College. He was shot, stabbed, and he had been castrated. He was found, but his vehicle was still missing. It was a red 1981 Plymouth, and that is when police realized that an identical vehicle had been parked outside a police station in Benton, and Benton was about 11 miles south of where the Dardeens lived. Inside of it was splattered with blood, and that blood was Keith Dardeen's. So, if you need to take a moment, I understand what I just gave you was horrifying. That this entire family, including two small children, met this horrifying fate. Take you a minute because I couldn't believe it either. So, after this happened, residents began to get even more paranoid and frightened, and they started openly carrying firearms. They were terrified because it's just like things just kept happening. And a lot of these people knew this family. A curfew was placed on people under 18. Local high school, the local high school would actually cancel its outside gym classes, and rumors began to swirl. Some said Keith was involved with crime, and some blamed Satanists and cults. It was almost pure hysteria in Ina. A task force began to follow leads and do interviews. A man was taken into custody. A co-worker who didn't really get along with Keith, but he was the only one who really had anything bad to say about him. Autopsies found no drugs or alcohol in any of the victims. It was determined that the family had been murdered at night within an hour of each other. The killers had taken the time to tuck Elaine and her kids' bodies into bed, clean up the scene, which meant that they were in no hurry to leave. The back door had been left open and there was no evidence of forced entry. A VCR and portable camera were in the living room, and cash and jewelry were also untouched. So robbery was ruled out as a motive, and there were no signs of carnal violation on the bodies. Neither spouse was having an affair. There was no chronic gambling, so it didn't seem like it was a debt thing. Some believed that it was a random target, but the coroner disagreed, saying it felt personal and deliberate. Before the case grew cold, it perplexed two FBI profilers who stated the crime defied their typical analytic methods. Eventually, the theory that remained is that they had been victims of a serial killer. For a short time, police showed interest in I'm so sorry if I pronounced this wrong, Angel Maturino Resendez, known then as Rafael Resendez Ramirez. He traveled the country by hopping freight trains and choosing victims near the tracks and beating them to death. However, they couldn't connect him to the Dardeen crime. On December 31st, 1999, Tommy Lynn Sells cut throats of two girls near Del Rio, Texas. He claimed to have blackouts prior to each crime. He was eventually convicted and sentenced to death for the girls, but while he was awaiting trial, he began to confess to a lot of other murders, including that of the Dardeens. In the 1980s, he resided near St. Louis and on a trip through Jefferson County in November of 1987, he claimed that he met Keith at a truck stop near Mount Vernon. He claims Keith invited him home to dinner, and after Keith angered him by proposing sex. Tommy Linsell says that he forced Keith to drive at gunpoint to the location that he was killed at, and that he castrated him and returned to the trailer to kill the others. Later, he would change the story. He claimed that he saw the trailer with a for sale sign and saw an opportunity. He said that uh, he drank and then he waited for the right time and then knocked and told Keith that he was interested in buying the home. Once he had entry, he overpowered him, made him bind and gag his wife and kids, and then drove to a field to kill Keith. Tommy Sells was never charged with the murders, but Jefferson County State's Attorney and Sheriff Roger Mulch agreed that he was the number one suspect. Even though he changed the story, he was privy to information only that police had. Police in Texas confirmed that he was responsible for 22 kills, although it was widely believed that he was lying about that number. While at first, Joanne Dardeen, Keith's mother, believed that it was Tommy, but then they didn't. Because why would Keith invite a stranger over or let one in? He was already so paranoid, it didn't really make sense that he would just let a complete stranger in. It just didn't add up. However, Joanne wanted to meet up with Tommy to see if he really did what he claimed he did, but they would never meet. In 2014, Tommy Sells was executed, and Joanne no longer believed it by that time. And when I was reading the article, she basically just said that, while yeah, he knew information, Keith just wouldn't let this random man in, and like the details he was giving didn't quite add up to what her son would have done, and it was just it. She said by the end of just her doing her own investigation, just going over it for so long, it just did not make sense, that she did not believe that it was Tommy. But the police still said like he is the number one suspect. But unfortunately, he would never be convicted of this crime. And the case is still unsolved. Now, it's worth mentioning that it was believed that the police did believe that Tommy had a role to play in this case, but they don't believe that he was the only one. Because while he was privy to information that only the police knew, he also got some of the information wrong. Or he wasn't like quite 100% on information, which would suggest that he had been working with other people, so he wasn't at each crime when it happened. So they do believe that it was more than one person, which honestly would make sense if all this was happening within an hour of each other and just everything that was going on. It definitely would suggest like it was a group thing that happened. But they were never really able to like get any more names or figure out who could have been working with Tommy or anything like that. Like there have never been any solid conclusions. I'm not sure what Joanne believed, like who she thought could have done it. I didn't see that, but she did state that she did not believe that it was Tommy. And unfortunately, this family does not have justice. They went through absolute hell, and their case is still unsolved to this day, and I just think that is horrifying. And apparently to this day, Ina is still not the best place to live. I'm not sure if crime is still as bad, But there, in a few articles, it did state like it's still not the best place, and people are still kind of weird about the whole crimes that have happened there. So it was not the best place to have a family, and it seems like he really just wanted away from that place. He just had this fear that something was going to happen, and something did happen, and they did not get out soon enough. Personally, I think I agree with the police that yes, Tommy had something to do with it, but it was more of a group thing, just because of he knows certain information, but not all of it. It would make sense that it was a group thing, and I just kind of wish that they would have been able to find out more information, and that this could have been solved a long time ago. But let me know your guys' thoughts down below. Do you think it was Tommy? Do you think it was something else? Let me know your thoughts down below. Thank you so much for listening to the story of Keith, Elaine, Peter, and their little girl. We did not know what they would have named her. And I will see you guys very soon. Bye, guys.